All right, welcome back, everybody, and let's have a little bit of a look here at using some sensors. We talked in class a little bit, but let's just review that idea. I'm going to use the touch sensor at the beginning just because it's one of the easiest ones to kind of understand. And then in another video, we'll talk about how to use some of these other sensors here, or at least how they work. So when we're wanting to use sensors, there's really three different ways of introducing them into our code. The first way with this touch sensor here, I'm going to use this pause until, and you'll see that appears on all the different sensors there. But the pause until allows us to kind of wait until something happens. So in this case, let's say we're running this motor here, and I'm going to just show you. I'm just going to show you in the simulator. It's easier to see here. So we're running the large motor at 50%, and basically what happens is this keeps on going, and this code. And if I were to pull this out of here, I've got a forever loop, so it's just going to go around and around and around and around and around, continuously running the motor. In this case, when I introduce the pause until, what happens is the code starts at the top and then moves down and runs the next line of code. So it's going to run this motor and keep going. And then it's going to hit the next line of code, which says pause until the touch is pressed, which essentially just sits here and it waits and waits and waits. Now, there's nothing that's going on after this code, so it's not going to add much. But if I say went to the motor here and I stopped all of the motors, you're going to see the motor keeps running. We're right here on this line. And then it hits the next line. And it just waits here, continues to run that motor because I haven't told it to do anything else until I press the touch. At which point in time, it's going to keep running the code. If I had 100 more lines here, it would go through 100 more lines. But I'm just waiting here. And then when I hit that touch button, there we go. Got to make sure I'm actually on it. And that's a little perplexing. Oh, I got to restart my code there. There we go. And that is very strange. Oh, I know why. Great little idea here. Well, I've got a forever loop. So it's going to stop all motors and then it's going to go around and come to the top here. So I'm going to change this to a on start rather than a forever. That makes sense. Remember, the forever loop is going to come around and around and around. So what happened before there is it stopped the motors probably for a tenth of a second or a hundredth of a second, and then went to the top and started running that motor again. In this case, I'm using an on start. So it says start running the motor, then pause it or pause until it's pressed, and then we're going to stop that motor. So when I click that, you're going to see we stop. So this is a great way of doing a pretty simple program because it just goes in a line and then we'll either loop around, or if you use an on start, it's only going to happen once, which is kind of handy. However, it kind of gets a little bit challenging when we have multiple things because you may have a lot of stuff going on and it's not just a pause and then keep going here. You may have other lines of code. So let's look at some of those other options. We also have a on touch sensor pressed. And we talked about this in class as well, where we would say, let's stop that motor, stop all motors here. And we're going to run into some problems because we're going to get conflicting messages here. And these are great. And it's wonderful to be able to do multiple things at the same time. But you as a programmer need to be aware that there may be multiple things that are in conflict. In this case, I'm saying run forever, this large motor. And then I'm also down here saying stop the motors when the touch one is pressed. And if you see when I press it, again, nothing happens here. Well, it is probably stopping it, but a nanosecond later, this forever loop kicks in and says, oh, keep running the motor. So I can't both run the motor forever and stop motor at the same time. So this is a very powerful way of programming and using your sensors However, you have to be aware of possible conflicts when you're doing it. So honestly, my favorite here with the sensors is to use this if-then statement, or this logical statement here. Touch 1 is pressed. And you'll notice here it's got a special shape, as we saw. So it's meant to go into a logic condition, which we call an if-then or an if-then-else statement here. I'm going to use the if-then statement. And basically the idea here is we have a question the robot asks itself. Is this thing true? If it is, whatever this statement is, then do the thing that's in this little sandwich. In this case, we could also say if something is false, then do this thing. And that's really just your two options here. Or we can drag this little shape up and replace it and say, well, here is a statement that can be true or false. Is the touch sensor in port 1 pressed? If it is, then I'm going to do something. And I can also add an else. If it's not, then do something else. In this case, I am going to just move that out of here. I'm going to drag this in, and I'm going to say, well, if I'm not touching the sensor, then I'm going to run the motor. But if I am touching the sensor, I am going to stop the motor. And if we run it like this, you can see now we're running here, and if I press it, I stop. But if I let go, you see we go again, because we are in a forever loop, so it's just going to keep going around and basically having two options. So a really powerful way, and gives you total control over your sensors.